Bangladesh executes two opposition leaders convicted of war crimes, but rights groups say that their trial didn't meet international standards. So, was this score settling between old political rivals or giving justice to victims of war? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. In Doha, I'm Adrian Finnegan. Two opposition leaders convicted of war crimes were hanged in Bangladesh on Sunday. Last-minute appeals for Ali Mujahid and Salahuddin Chowdhury were rejected by the president on Saturday. The men were convicted 2 years ago by a special tribunal investigating abuses during Bangladesh's 1971 war for independence from Pakistan. But many human rights groups have criticised the tribunal, saying that it doesn't meet international standards. And some in the US Congress have called it a flawed means of political retribution. We'll get to our discussion in just a moment on what this means for Bangladesh's political future. But first, Al Jazeera's Maha Sata reports from Dhaka.
Bangladesh fought its war of independence in 1971, but at that time, not everyone here wanted to separate from Pakistan. Some of those people are accused of forming militias that, along with the Pakistan army, committed mass atrocities, mass murders, mass rapes, targeting especially the Hindu community of Bangladesh. On Sunday, two men accused of such war crimes, Salahuddin Chowdhury and Ali Ahsan Muhammad Mujahid, were hanged. Chowdhury and Mujahid were both influential opposition politicians, and their supporters say that the trials were more about neutralizing the opposition than about justice. The government dismisses these allegations. They say that the trials were held to international legal standards. But despite these assurances, the executions have had an unsettling effect on Bangladesh, with people worried that there could be violence in protest of these executions. The government has deployed security personnel throughout the country, but despite that, at least one TV van covering Chowdhury's burial was attacked by as yet unidentified attackers, and one journalist has been wounded. Maher Sattar for Inside Story.
Well, here's a look at some of the charges the two opposition leaders were convicted of. Ali Ahsan Muhammad Mujahid was Secretary General of the JAMAAT-E-ISLAMI party. He was convicted of torture and the murders of intellectuals and Hindus during the war in 1971. Salahuddin Chowdhury was an advisor to the former Prime Minister Khaleda Zia. He was convicted of committing genocide, religious persecution and torture. Let's bring in our guests for this programme. From London, we're joined by Abbas Faiz, senior researcher on South Asia for Amnesty International. From Dhaka, via Skype, we're joined by Mofidul Haq, Liberation War Museum trustee, and also from London via Skype, we're joined by John Cammegh, former lead defence lawyer for the Bangladesh War Crimes Tribunal. Gentlemen, welcome to you all. John, if I can start with you, do you agree with the criticism of various human rights organisations that this tribunal, its verdict, the appeals process, were all seriously flawed?
Absolutely. When I was instructed in this case, I think at the beginning of 2011, it was already apparent by virtue of the instruments, the statutory instrument that had been created in order to form the blueprint for this tribunal, that any form of rights for the accused, any form of objective scrutiny of this tribunal was always going to be very, very difficult indeed, in fact, nigh on impossible. And without hyperbole, without, any sort of extreme, how can I put it? No words are perhaps extreme enough to describe just what an affront to justice this was. And the point I'd like to make is it's not only the tribunal per se that was so lacking in rights for the accused. This sets a very poor precedent for other developing countries who may be thinking of setting up tribunals in the same way.
John, was this legal ineptitude here? Was it a well-meaning attempt to get to some justice for the victims of the atrocities that occurred in 1971, and it's just gone badly wrong? Or do you think that there was some political interference in here, that the whole thing was politically motivated?
Well, I think you cast back to 1973 when an Act of Parliament in Bangladesh was passed in order to ratify this tribunal, but successive governments sat on it for decades. The Awami League was elected in, I think, 2010. Part of the electoral pledge was to try the war criminals. They were never described as anything other than war criminals. There was a sense of the whole thing being preordained from the start. Now, I can't deny, and no one with an objective mind can deny, that terrible atrocities were committed back in 1971. And it doesn't matter how long one has to wait. Justice has to be seen to be done, no matter how many years you have to wait. However, it's quite clear from the manner in which this tribunal was set up and run, quite clear from proclamations made by government ministers all the way through the trial, that this was entirely politically motivated. And to that extent, as I've just said, it sets a dreadful example amongst the developing world for anyone who, or any country that might have aspirations to form these type of tribunals in the future.
So, John, what are the implications of what you've just said, not for other developing nations, but for Bangladesh right now?
Well, they're very disturbing. I spent a lot of time because, ironically, I was actually prevented from doing my job in Bangladesh. My visa was effectively cancelled in the middle of 2011, so I was never able to go and conduct the trials in the courtroom myself, which is what I was instructed to do. So on occasions, I travelled, particularly to the United States. Several meetings I had in New York with the UN and even more in Washington, in congressional houses, in the State Department, even once in the Pentagon. And the advice I was giving was that if these trials remain unchecked, violence within Bangladesh is going to rise. And of course, the long-term effect has been seen. Only a week or so ago, we saw another horrific murder of a blogger. That's been going on all year. Hundreds of people have died through demonstrations surrounding these trials over the last 2 or 3 years. And the long-term prospect, perhaps even short-term prospect, is that this could fan the flames of all manner of violence on both sides, pro-government and, disturbingly, particularly given the climate we're now living in, no doubt a rise of Islamic extremism on the other side. Bangladesh is a powder keg right now, and this trial has done much, I would suggest, to fan those flames.
Let's bring in Abbas Faiz then from Amnesty International. I know, Abbas, that Amnesty is against the death penalty and would therefore condemn Sunday's executions. What is its view, though, on this particular case, the tribunal, its verdicts and the sentences?
The tribunal, of course, yeah, as you just mentioned, we are against the death penalty in all cases. And for that reason, we oppose the executions of these people. But when the tribunal was set up in 2010, we actually said that there have to be a number of conditions that have to be always followed in pursuing these trials. And those were that the trials should be absolutely fair. The reason for that is that this tribunal is dealing with offenses, with crimes that took place more than 40 years ago. And most of the evidence for these offenses are based on hearsay and in the best possible situation for verifying the information and the testimonies that are before the trial, there is a very strong possibility of misjudging and making a mistake. So for that reason, from the very beginning, we said that the trial should be absolutely fair. And unfortunately, they've never been fair. We also said that the death penalty especially when you are dealing with crimes that took place 40 years ago, and most of the people who would be witnesses of those crimes have either died or their memory has lapsed, and there are many other problems. We have always said that these trials should be fair. They were not fair. The trials, yes, sorry.
I was just going to ask then what you think Bangladesh should have done. Families of those who lost their lives in the war that led to the creation of Bangladesh deserve some form of justice, don't they? Some sort of closure.
Absolutely. I mean, what we are talking about is many, many people. The government says that up to 3 million people have died during this war of independence. Many women, hundreds of thousands, the government is saying, were subjected to rape, and millions of people were forced from their localities. In search of safety, they went to India, across the border. So those people deserve justice. But what we have said from the very beginning, that there are two sets of people who deserve justice. First, the victims of those atrocities in 1971, they do deserve justice, and people who committed those crimes should be brought to justice. The second thing is that the people who are accused of such crimes, they also have a right to a fair trial. And although the first set of, the kind of right of the victims has been addressed through the setting of this trial, the right of the accused has not been respected.
Okay.
And that is what we've been saying.
All right,
I can tell you later what the fundamental flaws are.
Okay, all right. Yeah, we'll get that in a while. Let's bring in Mofid al-Haq and let him have a say. You've heard what our other guests have had to say, Mofid. Do you agree that these tribunals were designed to settle political scores than to deliver true justice?
Well, I feel very hurt by the way that Amnesty Voice has joined with the person who has been a lobbyist for the perpetrators. And both of them, when they mentioned the 1971 crimes, the atrocities, or the words they have used, they have never used the word genocide and crimes against humanity, which this trial is for. This trial is not for war crimes as such. It is for international crime. And international crime, the three categories are genocide, the intent to destroy, either in whole or in part, a particular group, religious, national, racial, or ethnic, and crimes against humanity, widespread and systematic attack against civilian population. And for that, the international community has struggled long years and established the International Criminal Court. But in that struggle, there were lapses. There were period of darkness when nothing the international community could done to address the scenario.
Okay.
So Bangladesh event of 1971.
Mofid, I just want to get to your opinion here. Were these tribunals designed to deliver true justice, or was there political interference here?
Yeah, that depends on this historical fact that this was a tribunal for international crimes, for genocide and crimes against humanity. And for that, you have a separate set of laws, internationally recognized laws, where even hearsay evidence is also a part of the evidence. And also the old crimes, that does not mean that old crimes will not be addressed. The international community has also formulated the legal options for that. So the tribunal has been established on the basis of international criminal law, and it is delivering justice on the basis of that. And so there can be various observations, but one has to recognize that this is a tribunal established for addressing the criminality of genocide and crimes against humanity, not just terrible crimes or horrific crimes or any other past crimes.
But surely,
so I think here,
for true justice to be served, you have to have a fair trial. And according to various international critics, this certainly wasn't a fair tribunal.
Well, we want to have a dialogue with those critics. When they mention that where the flaws are, there can be critical observation of any court. I think even the other courts, the ICC, or there can be many observations like ICC is Africa-centric, or ECCC. We know the problem that Cambodian court is facing today, but that doesn't deny the process of justice, and due process of law should be followed. And we are committed to this. And I think justice has been delivered following the due process of law, and the verdict need to be studied very, carefully, and the flaws can be pointed out by those critics by following the process and also the judgment.
You say the verdicts need to be studied very carefully, but you've already carried out the sentences. If anything is discovered to have been flawed, it's too late for the men that you've executed.
If you look at the sentence of Ali Hassan Mujahid, one of the most atrocious crime of the killing of the intellectuals, which is an unbelievable, horrific event that happened at the fag end of the war, then who did it? The Al-Badrs. Who are they? The religious fundamentalist organization, which the Learned Council has raised that is on the rise in Bangladesh or in anywhere in the world, everywhere in the world. These were the religious fundamentalist forces who have used religion to motivate people and set them against the other group. So I think if we look into the criminality, into the atrocious thing that happened and the evidence, documents, eyewitness accounts that has been presented inside the tribunal, then you will see that where the flaws is, you have to come up with that. And no one of the accused denied of the atrocities that happened.
All right.
No one denied 3 million people have been killed.
No,
but they took a position.
I don't think anyone is denying that for one moment. What we're talking about here is whether the tribunal, the trial and the verdicts itself was fair. Let's bring back John Cammegh. What do you make of what you've just heard, John? Are you a lobbyist for the perpetrators?
No, and I'm afraid I've heard all of that before many times. It gets rather boring, frankly. Your guest just raised one or two interesting points that I'd like to deal with. He mentions crimes against humanity. Well, I'm grateful for the lecture in the ingredients and what makes crimes against humanity. One of the initial criticisms that we had of the statute laid down to form the basis of these trials was that the crimes had no definitions. Crimes against humanity for the purpose of this trial was never defined. Ergo, it was impossible for the defense to understand what ingredients of crimes against humanity the prosecution had to prove. But more importantly, therefore, it was impossible for the defense to understand what defenses were available. If you don't know the law, you don't know how to defend it. And that's absolutely fundamental. I mean, this is a fanciful notion to suggest that this was a mature tribunal set up to try current modern offences. There was no modernity to it at all. There could have been, had the trial been run on consistent lines with the ICC. Now, the International Criminal Court has, very well laid down rules of evidence, definitions of crimes, rules of procedure. Bangladesh, to their credit,
John,
is one of the only...
Yeah, but I was going to say, but you were just about to tell me, but Bangladesh is a signatory to the ICC Rome Statute. I just wonder why the ICC didn't try those accused of war crimes in Bangladesh itself.
Right. 2 points there. First of all, the ICC can't because it predates the the temporal jurisdiction of the ICC. ICC can't try anything prior to the 1998 Rome Statute. But that doesn't prevent, of course, the Bangladesh Ministry of Justice, government, whatever, from setting up a tribunal on ICC terms, using ICC definitions, ICC rules of procedure and evidence. They didn't. They used something that really made Stalin's show trials in the 1930s look tame by comparison.
All right, let's give Murphy the right of reply on that. What do you make of that accusation?
Well, the trial initiated on the International Crimes Tribunal Act of 1973, which was a landmark legal document at that time, and it was amended in various occasions as the tribunal was set up. And it also had under its jurisdiction the universal jurisdiction and also the later on development on universal human rights law and international criminal law. And even in the case of Ali Hassan Mujahid, the prosecution made an argument that he was part of the intellectual killing as a joint criminal enterprise, which we know that which has a very later development in the international criminal law and which was not in the in the definition of crimes against humanity, but it was part of the court proceedings in ICTY and also in the Cambodian court also. So the court is taking example and also creating new examples, and it is updating itself with all the later development of ICC and other international courts and also the national tribunal that has been established for international crimes. And we can say that we have, through this, even in the ICC, our colleague was right that ICC cannot go for retrospective justice, but ICC in its preamble has declared that it is the duty of the nation to address the international crimes, and if the nation fails, then ICC will come.
All right,
so Bangladesh has taken initiative, and it should be congratulated by the international community that it has taken the responsibility. The nation has, after long denial of justice, trampling of justice, has established the right to justice.
All right, I know John wants to come back on that. We'll let you in just a moment. But first, Abbas, Faiz in London, you've been listening to that discussion. What do you make of what you've heard?
Well, I think the fact that the tribunal is set up in a way that inevitably its proceedings will be unfair has to be looked at the statute of the tribunal. For example, this tribunal is the only court of law in Bangladesh whose jurisdiction cannot be challenged before a higher court. So that is one fundamental issue. The second thing is that this is a tribunal which actually sentences people to death. And when people are sentenced to death by other courts in Bangladesh, they have two rights of appeal to the High Court Division, which is equivalent of a High Court, and then one right of appeal to the Supreme Court. And after the Supreme Court, the appeal to the Supreme Court, a right to the review of the petition. But with this tribunal, there is no right of appeal to a high court. So one layer of appeal, two important appeals have already been removed from the process. So you can only directly appeal to the Supreme Court. And then the Supreme Court bench, the only other appeal against the sentence of the Supreme Court bench, or sometimes they pass sentences, against the decision of the Supreme Court bench is for the same bench to look at their own proceedings. So that is flawed. But what I would like to say is that the tribunal, also the practice of the tribunal has been flawed. For example, we have identified that a witness whose evidence was used to sentence one of these people to death had said that his evidence could be corroborated by another witness who was dead, but actually that second witness is very much alive.
John, we're rapidly running out of time. I need a brief answer from you, if you can. I just wonder, enough people were flagging up around the world that there were problems with this tribunal, that people were not exactly comfortable with what was going on. Why was there not more international pressure on Bangladesh to abandon a process over which there were so many misgivings around the world?
Well, there should have been. And I rather deprecate the word lobbyist. All I tried to do on occasions was alert people in various government agencies to the dangers of what this trial could lead to. Now, this sounds awful, but I think the truth is that Bangladesh just doesn't rate highly enough in terms of priorities in various countries around the world. It should have done. Can I just return to one issue that
you have to be very, very quick, John, very quick.
Yeah. Well, no modern tribunal would allow the chairman of the court to get involved in political interference, as this did. He had to resign. No modern tribunal would find that a witness who'd originally testified for the prosecution but then decided to testify for the defense would be abducted and be found in an Indian jail several months later. That's the level of the corruption that has riddled this tribunal. It's a great pity that countries around the world haven't taken more of a proactive stance to stop something that's so fundamentally flawed and dangerous.
There, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it. Many thanks to you, gentlemen. Abbas Faiz in London, Mufid al-Haq in Dhaka, and John Cammegh in London. Many thanks indeed. Thank you for watching the programme. Don't forget that, as always, if you've got any comments to make about the programme, you can go to our programme page at the website aljazeera.com, or you can look us up at Facebook/AJ Inside Story. And don't forget, you can tweet us, as always, at AJ Inside Story. From me, Adrian Finnegan, and all the team here in Doha, thanks for watching. We'll see you again. Bye for now.